When the cameras finally reached the USS Lexington after 76 years, the first thing researchers noticed wasn't the ship itself. It was the aircraft. Fighter planes were still sitting on the flight deck, exactly where the Pacific had left them in 1942. Not scattered, not buried beneath debris, simply waiting. For decades, historians knew where the Lexington had been lost, but no one expected the wreck to look as though time had paused the moment it slipped beneath the sea. And that raised a question the history books couldn't answer. Why were the aircraft still there? More than 3,000 meters below the surface of the Coral Sea, sunlight never reaches the ocean floor. The water's only a few degrees above freezing. The pressure is immense. Almost nothing moves. It is one of the few places on Earth where history can remain almost untouched. In March 2018, a research vessel named Petrel arrived above a section of ocean that had fascinated historians for generations. Funded by the late Paul Allen and operated by a team of marine archaeologists, engineers, and deep-sea specialists, the expedition had one objective: find the USS Lexington. Not because historians doubted the story of her sinking, but because no one had ever actually seen her resting place. The carrier had disappeared during one of the most important naval battles of the Second World War, taking more than 200 sailors with her. Since then, the Pacific had kept its silence, until now. The search began the same way many modern deep-sea expeditions do. Not with divers, not with submarines, but with autonomous underwater vehicles moving slowly across the seabed, using high-resolution sonar to build detailed maps of terrain no human eyes had ever seen. For days, the scans revealed little more than empty ocean floor, rock formations, sediment, occasional geological ridges. Then, one scan looked different. A long, unmistakably symmetrical shape appeared against the natural landscape, too large to be rock, too structured to be anything but human. The remotely operated vehicle was launched almost immediately. As it descended through the darkness, the light from its cameras illuminated only tiny particles drifting through the water. Meter by meter, the seabed came into view. Then, steel. The buoy emerged first, scarred by war, covered in marine growth, yet instantly recognizable. The team had found the USS Lexington, but that wasn't what left the researchers staring at their monitors. As the cameras climbed higher, something unexpected came into view. Aircraft, not one, several, still resting on the flight deck. Some remained upright. Others leaned gently against collapsed sections of steel. One still carried its folded wings. Another displayed the faded American star insignia that had last been seen during the spring of 1942. It looked less like a shipwreck and more like a moment that had never finished. That immediately created another mystery. The Lexington had suffered multiple bomb hits. She had been struck by torpedoes. Massive internal explosions had torn through the ship before she finally sank. So why hadn't those aircraft been thrown into the sea? The wreck itself seemed to contradict what many people imagined such a sinking should have looked like. And the deeper researchers looked, the more unusual the story became. The USS Lexington had entered service in 1927, but she had never been intended to become an aircraft carrier. She was originally designed as a battle cruiser. Only after international naval treaties limited the construction of capital ships was her unfinished hull converted into one of America's first fleet carriers. By the beginning of World War II, she had become one of the U.S. Navy's most valuable assets. More than 270 meters long, capable of carrying around 90 aircraft, a floating airbase built years before aircraft carriers would redefine naval warfare. Then came May 1942. The Battle of the Coral Sea. Today, it is remembered as the first naval battle in history where the opposing fleets never actually saw each other. Instead, aircraft searched hundreds of kilometers of open ocean, carrying the battle far beyond the horizon. On the morning of May 8th, Japanese reconnaissance aircraft located the Lexington. Not long afterward, waves of bombers and torpedo planes appeared overhead. The first explosions ripped through the flight deck. Moments later, torpedoes struck the port side below the waterline. Columns of smoke climbed into the sky. Fuel lines ruptured. Fires spread through multiple compartments. From above, it appeared the carrier had little chance of surviving. But inside the ship, the situation looked surprisingly different. Damage control teams worked with remarkable discipline. Flooding was contained, emergency repairs restored electrical power, several fires were brought under control. For a brief period, officers believed the impossible might happen. The Lexington might actually make it home. Then everything changed. Deep below the flight deck, gasoline vapors had been slowly spreading through damaged ventilation systems, almost invisible, almost impossible to detect under battle conditions. Hours after the initial attack, a single ignition source was enough. The explosion tore through the interior. Moments later, another followed. Entire compartments were engulfed, elevators jammed, communication systems failed. The battle against the enemy had become a battle against the ship itself. Captain Frederick Sherman watched as every new report grew worse than the last. Eventually, there was only one order left to give. Abandon ship. More than 2,700 sailors escaped into the surrounding sea, but 216 never came back. American destroyers later fired torpedoes into the burning carrier to prevent her from falling into Japanese hands. Shortly afterward, the Lexington disappeared beneath the Pacific. That version of events has been accepted for decades, but when researchers finally examined the wreck itself, they noticed details that raised entirely new questions. The ship rests upright on the seabed. Large sections of the hull remain remarkably intact. Anti-aircraft guns still point toward the surface. Several deck markings remain visible despite more than 7 decades underwater. And then there are the aircraft. Some appear almost exactly where crews likely left them during the evacuation. Others show surprisingly limited structural damage. One still carries markings painted by its pilot before the battle. It forces an uncomfortable question. If the explosions were powerful enough to destroy the carrier, why did so much on the flight deck survive? The answer may lie in something that happened long before the ship reached the ocean floor. Or it may still be hidden somewhere inside the wreck itself. The deeper researchers studied the wreck, the more they realized that the Lexington had been preserved by the very environment that had hidden her. At a depth of more than 3,000 meters, the Pacific is cold, dark, and almost completely isolated from the forces that destroy most shipwrecks. There are no storms, almost no sunlight, very little oxygen. Corrosion still happens, but far more slowly than in shallow water. That helps explain why the carrier still looks so recognizable. It does not explain everything. The aircraft remain the greatest puzzle. The most widely accepted explanation is surprisingly simple. When Captain Sherman gave the order to abandon ship, there was no longer time to secure every aircraft or move them below deck. The surviving crew focused on saving lives, not equipment. As the ship slowly settled beneath the waves, many of the aircraft simply went down with her. It is a practical explanation, and it fits much of the historical record. But not everyone believes it tells the whole story. Some researchers suggest that the sequence of explosions may have played an unexpected role. Instead of throwing aircraft across the deck, collapsing sections of the flight deck may actually have locked some of them into place. In other words, the damage itself may have protected what remained. There is also another possibility, one that cannot easily be confirmed. The remotely operated vehicles have explored only a fraction of the Lexington. Much of the hangar deck remains hidden. Many internal compartments are inaccessible. Some areas are simply too dangerous or too sacred to enter. The Lexington is not only an archaeological site, it is also the final resting place of 216 sailors. For that reason, many historians believe large sections of the ship should never be disturbed. Others argue the opposite. Modern technology has reached a point where underwater archaeology can recover extraordinary information without physically touching a wreck. High-resolution imaging, laser mapping, three-dimensional reconstruction. Every new expedition reveals details that previous generations could never have imagined. So where should the line be drawn? Should every discovery be investigated as thoroughly as possible? Or does preserving history sometimes mean leaving it exactly where it is? That debate reaches far beyond the Lexington. Across the Pacific, thousands of wartime wrecks remain undiscovered. Many are believed to contain aircraft, military equipment, and personal belongings that have remained untouched since the 1940s. Some may never be found. Others may already have been located, but their positions intentionally kept secret to protect them from looting or unauthorized salvage. Even today, researchers continue examining the footage collected during the Petrel expedition, not because the wreck has changed, but because every improvement in imaging technology reveals details that were overlooked before. The Lexington has already answered one of history's oldest questions. We now know where she rests, but the discovery also created new ones. Why do the aircraft appear so undisturbed? What still lies inside the sealed sections of the carrier? And how many stories remain locked behind doors that may never be opened? Perhaps the greatest discovery wasn't finding the USS Lexington at all. Perhaps it was realizing that even after 76 years, the ship is still keeping some of its secrets.